Pre-gap bundle. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and welcome to the library. Oftentimes when I shoot these intros, people ask me, in the comments below that is, because, you know, if they're not standing in front of me, when I'm shooting these, we're not having a conversation. They typey down below and they say, Tennessee Fats, what are you reading that's not Conan? What's in that library? So I figure, let's actually do one of these interrupting videos in the middle of the week this week and actually talk through that, because I actually just read something that's not Conan. It's this. Now that's the Savage Epics collection of Edgar Rice Burroughs, which has The Land That Time Forgot, At the Earth's Core, and the original Tarzan story. Now, if you've watched many of my videos, you know, I kind of like my Tarzan. It's a thing. I read the comics. I have the intro to these videos. That's a Tarzan reference for a reason. But the funny part about it is, I've never read the original Tarzan story. Literally. I've read all these Tarzan comics. I've had all these conversations about it, but I've never actually read that original Tarzan of the Apes piece of work. So, I sat down and read these. And I got to tell you, I got thoughts. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make this a quick one. We're going to turn the camera around. We're going to sit down at the desk. I'm going to talk through some high-level thoughts that I had about the original Tarzan of the Apes, At the Earth's Core, and The Land That Time Forgot. Alright, it's time for the very quick sitty-downy talky part of this video, because I got to tell you, I don't want to make this a half-an-hour long video, so we're not gonna. Here's the deal. Edgar Rice Burroughs has people who are really for his work, and at the same time there are people who are really against his work. Now, I get it. I entirely get it. There are really strong positive things in Edgar Rice Burroughs, but at the same time there are very time-sensitive and time-specific negative things in his work. But I'm not going to get into that in this video. The bottom line is I actually enjoy the stories. Again, I look at them through the lens of looking backwards in time, and I have the benefit of hindsight to say, well, that was wrong. But the stories themselves are good. My actual introduction to Edgar Rice Burroughs was this. And this was with Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars collection. This was the first piece of Burroughs stuff that I ever read, and I really enjoyed it, which is interesting because I'm a sword and sorcery guy, but you could argue this is more of a space sci-fi fantasy. I'd still say it's sword and sorcery, just happens to be on Mars. But we don't need to go down that road. But I found my way falling into the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe more lately, completely by accident. And it led to me then saying, well, I better pick up this Tarzan book and finally read it. Now, here's what brought us to here. Here's what brought us to here. Yeah, that sounds legit. Yeah, we'll go with it. Okay. I reviewed a book a while ago, and I'm going to put the image over here. And that was Flight to Opar, which was written by this guy named Philippe Jose Farmer. I'd never read any of his work before, and I put a video review of that, and I'll put a link to that down below. It utterly blew my mind. It blew my mind because when I was reading through it, I was like, okay, this is kind of a cool story. I'm like, who are these characters based on? What's going on here? Where is this coming from? And I found myself in the Tarzan universe. I found myself in the Tarzan universe being written by an author that wasn't Edgar Rice Burroughs, which I found fascinating. So then I looked more into this and found out there's a whole Edgar Rice Burroughs universe being written about that I didn't even know about. I'll be completely honest about that. And it just floored me. I was very happy about that. And that book led to me then turning around and going and finding this book, which is the original one, because I read the Flight to Opar one out of order. I should have read Haidon of Ancient Opar first. And I put a review of that, and I'll put a video link to that down below as well. Again, the Tarzan mythos and the Tarzan universe was being thrown back at me, and I was like, wow, this is just fantastic stuff. I'll tell you, I'm actually in the middle of reading... Whoa, I can't show you this one. This one's got boobers on the cover. The book is called Time's Last Gift, which is the one that's, I guess, the precursor to both of these Opar books, because I'm pretty sure I know who the character is that's in that Time's Last Gift story that ends up becoming that immortal, godlike peppering guy that appears in the Hayden H. Opar books, which were just fantastic. That I used to, for some reason, was carrying my own baggage to them, and I used to think was potentially King Kull. I was wrong. It's definitely not. It's definitely not. And I'm pretty sure I know that. No spoilers, and nobody spoil it for me, because I'm not done reading that. I'm not done reading that Time's Last Gifting yet. I will figure it out on my own. Actually, I'm pretty sure I already figured it out, but let me figure it out on my own. Yeah, bottom line, I got all those on my hands, and I was quite happy with those. But I said, well, since I've read so much around the Tarzan universe, it's now time for me to actually read in the Tarzan universe. So when this Savage Epics book came up, I was like, yeah, I better just get it and actually finally read the first Tarzan story. And I gotta tell you, I got some thoughts. So let's go through the three stories here, one at a time. And at the end of this thing, we'll wrap it up and say whether I enjoyed this, whether I found this to be a positive experience, or whether this was really one of those ones that was like, wow, you really should never meet your heroes. Okay, let's start off with the $1 million one. Let's start with the white whale here. Let's just jump right into this thing and actually get into the big topic. The $1 million topic. Tarzan of the Apes. Tennessee Fats. What did you think of it? Well, a couple things. A, I'm still floored that I'm literally getting to 50. Yes, people, I'm actually 50. I'm getting there. And I still haven't read Tarzan of the Apes up until now. Now, as a swords and sorcery and a Conan guy, yeah, that sort of floors me. But anyway, I got into it and we've corrected that now. Here's the deal with the Tarzan story. And I'm going to make this fairly quick and fairly brief. It actually was what I kind of expected it would be. We all know the story of Tarzan. It's a fascinating story about Tarzan being raised by this group of apes, which wasn't actually a group of apes. It's this sort of mixture of apes, but an intelligent form of apes that are more humanoid than just what you would call, I guess, lowland mountain apes. Something like that. But the bottom line is, and we don't need to go into the technicalities of naming the Marjani and what they do, but the bottom line is he's raised in the wild. And it's this wonderful discussion and this epic intellectual process of saying, well, what would happen to a human being if they were raised outside of what we deem to be humanity? Which is fascinating when you think about it in the small microcosm sense. But in the bigger sense, it's also a larger question that we all carry with ourselves. It's like, well, what would I be like if I wasn't raised with the sentiments that I have? What is the difference between nature and nurture? Which is this question that we've been asking ourselves for hundreds of years. But we still don't really have an answer yet. Interesting story, and I do like the way this went. But it did really follow everything that you expected when you were looking at modern interpretations of how we've seen Tarzan in pop culture. When you read the 1970s Tarzan comics from Marvel, there's very clearly a story there, and there's very clearly an origin, and that origin did not deviate materially from what Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote all the way back then. It really was what it was. There's nothing really that should surprise you in here. Now, I will tell you, the things that did surprise me as I was going through this was really how dark this story was. And it makes me wonder if this was done intentionally, or if this was something that was just really something that was necessary to convey the mood and to convey the atmosphere that Tarzan was living in that you don't really have a wonderful, flowery, beautiful picture of how peaceful Tarzan's life was as a child. It definitely was not. It was phenomenally negative. It was harsh. And this is what led to the environment that led to him having these abilities where he could fly through, well, not fly, but jump his way through trees. He could pick up human weight and carry it for miles. Phenomenal amounts of endurance. Really positing to you as the reader to say, well, actually, if you weren't raised with the limitations of humanity, look at all the extra that you could do. Now, I will be very clear with this. Edgar Rice Burroughs within this story did drop hints throughout it that really kind of suggested that these almost supernatural abilities that Tarzan developed over his youth and his lifetime in the wild might have been somewhat genetic as well. And I don't know, that part, it leads to a level of darkness that makes you say, well, maybe it isn't really just a study of what would happen to people if they were raised in the wild. Maybe it's you throwing more into it there, Edgar. But at the end of the day, it leads to this dark-ish sort of story. But it also leads to this real sense of understanding what it must have been like to be a writer, given that this was his first hit, writing in a serialized format. Because the story went very well through the majority of it, but you could tell as you were getting near the end of the story, for any of you who've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about when I talk about this, is that suddenly the pace accelerates. It's almost like the author is getting tired of what they're writing because they're just trying to wrap it up. And you can clearly see that here with the Jane and Tarzan dynamic and how it relates to Clayton. Clayton being the existing, well, I'm not going to spoil it. Clayton just happens to have a title at this point in time and a lot of money that doesn't really belong to him. And guess who it does belong to? Tarzan. But it's this strange dynamic where you have this modern sort of post-Elizabethan sentimentality tied to Jane's activities and what she's thinking. And the way she's behaving in this upper crust society that Edgar Rice Burroughs is depicting, and how it completely screws Tarzan over. It's this horrible, and the worst part about it was, if Tarzan actually took the extra step at the end of this thing, and actually did just say, no, here's the scientific proof that I am actually that guy, and no, your title's actually my title. this whole thing would have wrapped up in one story, and you would have had this wonderful ending where suddenly Tarzan, you, Jane, would have just worked out, and that would have been the end of it. But this thing actually ends on a cliffhanger. Here, I'll read for you the little snippet that's stuck at the end of the story, where Tarzan basically disavows the scientific knowledge that he has, where he knows that he has inherited Clayton's effective wealth and title. And it says, at the end of this thing where he explains, no, my mother was an ape. End of conversation. For further adventures of Tarzan and what came of his noble act of self-renunciation, I like that word, are told in The Return of Tarzan, now available in the Edgar Rice Burroughs Authorized Library. And I'm pretty sure that at the end of the day, when this thing was originally serialized, that wasn't there. But as a reader of serials that were coming out on a regular basis through the pulp magazines at the time, you knew that this was going to be continued. It just left you this weird cliffhanger. Overall, a good story. Dark as all hell. But really did just fulfill exactly what I expected Tarzan would be. Okay, at the Earth's core, let's get into this thing. Now, this thing, I tell you, I've read a variety of stories that are all about, there's a world within the world and the hollow earth theory and, the idea of, a whole prehistoric society living in it. This is a common theme and a trope used in sci-fi and sword and sorcery. It's a thing. And we've all seen it exposed many, many times. Now, at the Earth's core, I'll tell you, I am fairly certain I remember watching a movie, and it must have been made in the mid to late 70s, that was called At the Earth's Core. And I'm pretty sure I can go find this probably right now just on streaming services if I really wanted to, and I could watch it again. So I'm pretty sure I understand the story here, and I remember this prior to reading the story itself. And in this story, effectively, you have a young man and his elder sort of statesman type scientific genius father figure that have bored a hole into the center of the earth and come out in this prehistoric society where they find proto-humans and people living in different stages of human evolution. But at the end of the day, there's this horrible, horrible group of, I guess what you would call, like pterodons that are intelligent, that can't hear, but they can communicate telepathically. They understand sign language, and they communicate with their slave, sort of ape-man hybrid slave race through sign language, which is also weird. But at the end of the day, he has to find his way to survive within the Earth's core and find his way back out. And almost as a trope that you see time and time again, also within a sword and sorcery story, the story's being narrated retroactively after they've escaped, but now they're trying to get back. It's like Journey to the Center of the Earth, where everything is sort of written after the fact. It's this weird thing. And you see it. I understand that. But this story I really didn't go into with any expectations. I just went, okay, well, I think I know the story from that movie, and I think I know what's going to happen here. But if it's Edgar Rice Burroughs, it should be good. Let's see what this whole thing is all about. Well, I've given you the synopsis of this whole thing, but here's another aspect of this. And again, it comes forward in this, and I'm seeing the same theme popping up in this that I saw in the last one, which is this level of darkness. And it's a fascinating thing, because in the intro to this book, one of the things they talk about is Edgar Rice Burroughs really honed his skills in storytelling by standing around and telling stories with his friends, but also telling bedtime stories to his children. I gotta tell you, if I was a child sitting in bed having my father telling me this story and listening to this narrative, I'd probably be a little worried. I'd be a little concerned. I'm like, whoa, that's dark, Dad. Where did you get that from? That's, you should probably seek some help about that. But you probably wouldn't have said that back in the day because, well, it's the turn of the century and things wouldn't have gone well through your relationship with your father thereafter. The story itself was quite good. In this, you have the heroic figure who does almost superhuman things. But you also have a real sense of this character, and you have a sense of, he acknowledges that as he's fumbling along, he's being incredibly lucky as he's going. He's recognizing that, well, I probably shouldn't have survived that, but I did, and it was a complete fluke, and here's how. And, well, I probably shouldn't have gotten into this, but I did, and it was a complete fluke, and here's how. Or I got this real fatalistic sense of how things were going to happen, so I really didn't care anymore, which I kind of really understand when you listen to the narrative of what was happening to the character. But I'll tell you, here's where I kind of lost a little bit of this story. These Mahar guys, these pterodon sentient things that run the middle of the earth, that's dark. Like, really dark. Okay, hold on. So, for those of you who don't know the story, I'm not going to spoil too much of it for you, but the bottom line is that these Mahars basically treat all the humanoids in this world like slavery, like slave labor. And nobody does well with slave labor. It's never a good idea. And in that, you have a little bit of dialogue about the Mahars and the things they do and the things that they don't do. But a little known secret is that the Mahars actually eat people. They're not supposed to. Their own society frowns upon it, but they eat people. Like, and there's one part of this that is really just off-putting. And this is the one that sort of made me go, whoa. And let's take a moment here. Let's take a reading from the old book of Tennessee Fats here. And this is basically our lead character has found his way into the Mahar temple, where everything is silent. Now, the Mahars have the ability to hypnotize people and force them to do things if they're weak-willed, which was a reference that was within here, and I don't really understand how that works, but who knows? In this, the Mahars are going through this horrible process of basically torturing slaves and eating them alive. So there's a queen of these Mahars, and our lead character is observing this. And what's happened is she's hypnotized this child, a girl, a helpless girl, dragged the helpless girl to her doom. Her eyes fixed before her as they had when she dragged the helpless girl to. Okay, where do we go? And then to my utter amazement, I saw the forehead and the eyes of the maidens slowly come out of the depths, because they're walking underwater as they're hypnotized, and then coming back up. And it's almost being done as this sort of weird pantomime dance thing. Following the gaze of the reptile, just as when she had disappeared beneath the surface. On and on came the girl until she stood in the water that reached barely to her knees, and then she had been beneath the surface sufficient time and had drowned her thrice over. There was no indication. Again, this is a weird thing where in the middle of the earth there's no sense of time, other than her dripping hair and glistening body, that she had been submerged at all. Again and again the queen led the girl into the depths, and out again, until an uncanny weirdness of the thing got on my nerves, so that I could have leapt into the tank to the child's rescue had I not been held and taken a firm hold of myself. Once they were below longer than usual. When they came to the surface, I was horrified to see that one of the girl's arms was gone, gnawed completely off at the shoulder. But the poor thing gave no indication of realizing pain. Only the horror in her set eyes seemed intensified. The next time they disappeared, the other arm was gone, and then the breast, and then part of the face. It was awful. This continues to go on describing this process. That's dark. And like sick and twisted level dark. Like that. Where did he come up with this? Like that is, I did not expect, from the guy who wrote Warlord of Mars, John Carter of Mars, I did not expect that. And you want real dark, because this is really the Mahars being bad. No. Do you know how he escaped from the Mahars? Here's how he escaped from the Mahars. The Mahars were hanging out, snoozing, and he killed 4 of them. Did he kill the 4 snoozing ones? Yeah, he did kill the 4 snoozing ones. So here's what he does. He gets his flunkies together as they're trying to escape from the Mahar slave pens. Sometime later, we had removed the skins from the 4 Mahars, and so succeeding in crawling inside of them ourselves that there seemed an excellent chance for us to pass unnoticed from Phutra. Phutra is the city the Mahars have. It's not an easy thing to fasten the hides together where we had split them along the belly or remove them from their carcasses, but by remaining out until the others had been sewed in with my help, and then leaving an aperture in the breast of Perry's skin through which he could pass his head to sew me up, we were enabled to accomplish our design to really much better purpose than I had hoped. We managed to keep our heads erect by passing our swords up through the necks, and by the same means were enabled to move them about in a lifelike manner. They killed them and then wore their skins. Skinned them? And wore their skins to leave. Ooh. Like that? Ooh. Now, again, it's a different time. I understand that. This was a very savage and dangerous world that he's in. I get that. But that is just weird. This isn't the Mahars being weird. This is the human protagonist skinning his enemies and then wearing their skins so that he can walk out of their city. Oh, just gross. Alright, let's get into the land of time forgotten. Now this one, I gotta tell you, this one for me was the pleasant surprise of the actual book. Which is funny, you know, you pick this up and I'm a Tarzan guy and I'm thinking, okay, this is gonna be the one. And then at the Earth's core I was like, ooh, that's stupid level dark. And then you get to the land of time forgotten and I'm like, okay, what are we gonna get now? And then you get this wonderful story. And it just sort of floored me. Now, I'm gonna caveat this. It floored me for 2 reasons. The first one is specific to me. and it's specific to me because I really do enjoy watching submarine and Navy movies. It's something that I like spending my time on. And the majority of the story is actually a World War I submarine story where the protagonist and a group of captured Germans and a group of British sailors are sharing this World War I submarine, not always amicably, as they travel around trying to find a neutral port where they can then set themselves up and they can just live out the rest of the First World War, which was really cool, but they're lost. The second part of the story, which is the part which I also really enjoyed, was the wonderful epic fantasy piece where they find an entire microcosm of the world's history inside a volcanic caldera that's sitting in the South Seas. And it's strange because this volcanic caldera has this weird magnetic power that's drawing all compasses to it, which is why they were lost in the first place. But inside it, every stage of the Earth's, I guess, inhabited evolution is being represented, all depending on whether you start up in the first lagoon where you appear, all the way up to where you get to, I guess, mountainous, cold regions where things are the most evolved, as we would define evolved now. And it's amazing because you have all these dinosaurs from various stages of dinosaur life, and then Ice Age life, and then post-Younger Dryas life. And you've got this wonderful walkthrough here where you run into everything. And the humans that are trapped within this submarine get to witness this and the horrors of the Earth's evolution all the way up to that point. To the point where very few of them survive. And at the end of the day, our protagonist and his romantic interest decide to live out the rest of their life sitting up in the mountainous region where things are the most evolved. Now, as far as the most evolved goes, now this is where really I think this does win. And I mean win as in, out of these three stories, this is the absolute best one within it, which really, again, surprised me. Because it sort of drags at points as far as the writing goes, but the ideas are really, really cool. And they leave you guessing. You don't know. I have no flipping idea what the hell Edgar Rice Burroughs was on when he wrote this. I cannot tell you. To me, it seems like it's this weird world between mysticism and evolution where nothing makes sense. And it just leaves you going, well, hold on. What are we talking about here? Now, here's where I'm going to come from this, okay? The further you get inland, you go from hot weather to cold weather up in the mountains. And the closest you get to up to those cold mountains is where things are the most evolved, i.e. the closest to what these individuals who were World War I sailors were exposed to. So when they started running into humans, they went all the way back from upright hominids to Neanderthal-like individuals, to hunter-gatherers, to basically following the Homo sapien line, up to the point where what a European would classify as the individuals they ran into in North America as. And again, some of the language in here leaves you going, don't know if I would use that word, but it doesn't matter. The idea is you get from here to there. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is that it doesn't seem to be multi-generational. It seems to be this weird thing where if you listen to the narratives of the individuals they run into, they're not evolving post-lives. They're evolving in their lifetime. And this is the thing that makes it's weird. I can't figure this out at all. If any of you have any ideas or you've read subsequent parts of this Land That Time Forgot thing, because there is actually, I know when I looked into this, a whole story that goes with people coming in and out of this land. You explain it to me, okay? So one of the things, and this is, I really want to give you an example here of, all right, here we go. So they had a friend whose name was who was a phenomenally primitive individual they ran into up front. But when they went further inland, they were running into more people who were more advanced. And they asked them, said, hey, do you guys know And one of them said, back there we may have known him, but he jerked his head to the south. You came from back there, I asked. He looked at me in surprise. We all come from back there, he said. After a while, we go there, and his head jerked towards the north. Be gallows, he concluded. There seems to be this understanding when, as soon as they're able to communicate with complex ideas with the locals they run into, that they're changing. But they're changing in such a way that they're losing their memory of what was before and what their life was before, and as they move forward. And I think it has something to do with these weird scum-filled ponds that these ladies are dipping into on a daily basis. And I'll tell you, and it's not just one, it's all of them. They run into this repeatedly. Okay, after breakfast, the men set out to hunt, while the women went to the large pool of warm water covered with green scum and filled with billions of tadpoles. They waded in there, where the water was about a foot deep, and lay down in the mud. They do this for 1 or 2 hours. That's just one of the groups of people. Then later on, he's captured by an even more advanced group of people, and somebody's helping him escape. And where are we at here? Let's see. Let me think about it. I parried, and Tojo said that he would wait until night. He would give me a day to think it over, and then left, and the women left. The men went to the hunt, and the women, as I learned later from Sota, went to the warm pool where they immersed their bodies, as did the sheaves of the Stolu. The Stolu, by the way, were the slightly less advanced people in these ones that Tojo was a part of. Tojo, and Sota. It's really a fascinating thing. It leads you to the point where you're asking yourself as the reader, hold on, are the individuals of this particular land believers in reincarnation? They die to the south and then reincarnated further to the north to become Galus, who is this idea they have of this advanced individual. And when they run into these people who are from the 1910s, let's call that, they're convinced they are Galus because they clearly are the more advanced people. Funny part is when our group here heads all the way to the north to hit the end of land, they never run into the Galus. There are no Galus. So are these people talking about reincarnation from one life to the next, and that's why they don't remember the prior ones? Or are they actually evolving and moving further up with time as they become more and more immersed in, I guess, in females' cases, in these pools full of scum and tadpoles, or in the male's case, just by existing and then moving further north? It's a weird thing, and it leaves you asking a bajillion questions. Honestly, I really enjoyed the story because it left me asking a bajillion questions. I actually do think I will read more of this particular storyline now because I want to know more about, well, what the hell is that? It was really cool. I enjoyed that one. Okay, let's get to the bajillion-dollar question time now. I've talked about the three stories here, and we want to keep this quick. I know I've already gone a little long, but we want to keep it quicker. Did I enjoy this? Honestly, I don't think I did that much. I was actually kind of disappointed on this one, and I'm not going to lie. And I shoot this part without any sort of forethought because I want to make sure I'm being honest with you guys and being honest with me. There are no notes in front of me. This is just, and no post-it notes in the book saying, hey, Tennessee Fats, you really enjoyed this. No, actually, part one was exactly what I expected to be, which was Tarzan of the Apes. It did not deviate at all, except for the weird twist in the writing and the sense that I got that the end was being hurried, which kind of made me go, And I get that it was being hurried because I guess they were trying to create a cliffhanger so that you would come back and buy the next issue of whatever the pulp was that this was published in. I get that, but when you're reading this story, which isn't part of the pulp, you go, that sucks. Why wouldn't you have included that here? Like, why not Return of Tarzan right after this, just to finish the story? I don't know. It left me with just sort of this taste of, I don't think it was the story. I think it was more just the presentation as a self-contained piece. I didn't really enjoy that. What do we got here? At the Earth's Core. That was effed up. No. I will not read more stories of that. There's a lot of very interesting aspects of what the world in the Earth's Core is going to be like. But this whole thing about, wearing pterodactyl skins, pterodactyls basically ritualistically torturing human beings by eating pieces of their face off while they're conscious and aware that they're being eaten alive. No. This is just a story I don't need to read. The last piece, though, The Land That Time Forgot. Yeah, I tell you, I like that. I like it. So set aside the whole submarine part of this thing, which I know is just a me thing. As far as the actual story goes, and again, on this one, I also get the sense that the narrative was sped up at the end as they were trying to end the serial. But the actual core content and the nagging questions of, well, what is this evolution that there's here, that there's, what's causing it? I found that fascinating. And I found it to be a really interesting subject piece to be discussed within the actual work. Really cool. It was this sort of weird blending of evolution and mysticism, and at the end of the day, we don't know. Now, I'm hoping in later stories that I might pick up that are part of this overall anthology that go with that chain of thought, I'm going to get an answer, and maybe that'll leave me with a very satisfied sense, or maybe going, really? That's what you went with this? Really? But only time will tell. Would I buy this again? I think I would. Because, I did never read Tarzan of the Apes before, and reading At the Earth's Core, well, I know now to set that aside, and reading The Land That Time Forgot, yeah, I'm actually interested in picking up more material now, so I would say yes. If you're a big Edgar Rice Burroughs fan, and you haven't read these stories before, yeah, you probably want to read these. If you're somebody who's just passing interest in sort of sci-fi and fantasy and what have you, you already know the Tarzan of the Apes story. That's part of our common pop culture knowledge right now. You're not going to get anything else out of this. At the Earth's core, you can skip. Okay, The Land That Time Forgot. You might just want to go pick that one up on your own because that was just darn cool. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. I tell you, this was an interesting one for me. And when I bought this, and I did buy this for myself, I expected that I was just going to be floored and blown away by this. And I find it interesting that I'm looking back at it now, and I wasn't. I really wasn't. The last story in here I enjoyed, but the first two just didn't really add anything for me. And the second one was just, ugh, it just left a taste. It's like somebody putting a hair on your tongue. I was like, oh, that's just, there's a hair on my tongue. I did not like it at all. Ooh. Maybe it's because I'm so focused, or I'm so biased on this sort of cosmic stuff that I enjoy this so much. I was expecting something to come out of the Savage epics that just wasn't there. I think I will pick up the Cosmic Epics, which is another one that I think was released around the same time as this, and maybe that'll focus a little more on the stuff that I'm interested in, and I might enjoy that sort of let's just call it universe component more than I enjoyed this. Weird one. No, well, there you go, everybody. There's the honest thoughts of Tennessee Facts on this particular one. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one.